years and some months. And it's interesting because when I first moved to Brentwood, which was about the same time, and I went to Immaculate Heart of Mary, they had in their bulletin a little notice about people who wanted to help the St. Vincent de Paul group. And I thought, I had heard of St. Vincent de Paul. I mean, I knew of them, but I didn't know about them. Well, needless to say, after I went there and they were very welcoming, and I started helping out at the food pantry that many years ago. Since then, I've become very much more engaged with the society, at least. But it was kind of interesting because, like I say, I just responded to something in the bulletin, not knowing at all what would end up. And it's been a wonderful experience being a Vincentian. So let's start with Jo Beth. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Jo Beth Strawn. I'm from St. David of Wales Parish in Richmond. I kind of came into the Vincentians kicking and screaming. One of our parishioners kept telling me that, inviting me to put my hat in the ring to be voted on as to whether or not I would be president. And I hadn't gone to Stephen's talk at the church. I didn't go to the one to follow up on a Thursday. And this guy just kept bugging me. And I finally, to get rid of him, I said, look, I'm going to go home and have my husband, and we're going to pray. And we're going to ask God if he wants me to be in the Vincentians. I said, I can't be. My husband's had a stroke. I'm involved in this and that and this and that. So I came home. I explained to my husband, who had a stroke in '94, the situation. And previously we had prayed, which St. Francis did when he was beginning, over the Bible and asked God to speak to us through the Bible. And so we did that. And my husband opened, since he's the head here of the body of Christ in our home, he opened the Bible and he was reading, and he didn't see anything that applied to it. I said, okay, give me the Bible. And I got the Bible and I started reading through it. The first page, nothing. The second page, it was the apostles gathering together to vote for the replacement of Judas. And I'm like, okay, God, this is your work. There's no way that I can see that I have time for this. And that's how I came in as president. And then I went to spiritual advisor. And now I'm coming back as the secretary with my son as the new president.
Great. Okay, Diane, why don't you unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diane Roble. I'm from the St. Vincent de Paul Conference in St. John Vianney in Walnut Creek. I've been a member of the group for about 2.5 years now. And I too responded to a notice in the bulletin about the society. I had a vague idea of what the society did, but not entirely. And when I retired, I wanted to become more involved, and that's why I joined the society.
Great. Okay, Stephen, you're next.
Okay, I came into the society. I had about 1994. I'd been working for an ad agency in San Francisco, and a friend of mine had a chance to set up a project in prison, and I had worked with people in trouble as sort of an avocation for a number of years, and so I wound up in Beaumont, Texas, setting up what they called an IPTC, in-prison therapeutic community. Did that for a couple of years, and when I came back to the Bay Area, I wanted to use that experience because I loved working with people. And a lot of the place I interviewed wanted me to do program development stuff, but I really wanted to work with people. And my cousin, Vincent, was working at the free dining room in Oakland and asked me if I would, since I didn't have something that I was doing, pick up food for the free dining room. So I started out picking up the food at the grocery stores. And then there was just to make a long story short, there was a grant that they'd gotten to build out the Women's Center, which left this empty building. And they asked me if I wanted to help set up what was the Champion Guidance Center. And that grew very, very quickly. And we started our first medical clinic, and then we had a workforce development program. And then we had, it just grew kind of exponentially, and was in Alameda County for about 8 years. And then in about 12 years ago, had a chance to come to Contra Costa County and work with the conferences on serving the poor. And I've been here ever since.
And working very hard. I know that. Okay, Sheila, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm the Secretary of St. Mary's Conference in Walnut Creek, and I started with St. Vincent de Paul about 5 years ago. I can't even remember how I came into it, but I really enjoyed being with the people in the pantry and handing out food and smiling at them and caring about their problems. So with COVID, I haven't been able to work for about a year and a half. So I decided that I would take on the secretary job as a way of contributing. So hopefully I can return to the pantry soon.
Very good. Okay, now that we all kind of know each other, I'm going to talk a bit about the job of being secretary. And if you don't have this, I can show this. And you all see this. This is the latest conference secretary handbook. If you don't have a copy, let Stephen or myself know, and we'll make sure you get one, because it's really much better than the old one. Let me tell you, a lot better. So, okay. There's a lot of information in that handbook, but I think the thing that's best is there's a list of kind of duties. Obviously, a secretary takes minutes or takes care of all the correspondence. I mean, that's not just in our society, but in any group where there is a secretary, they take notes, they take minutes, they write letters, they do all of that sort of stuff. In our society, we also are responsible for things like taking roll call, worrying about that we record things like any meetings, that we have all the different forms. But let me tell you, the list of things for a secretary may be long and it looks like a lot of responsibility. However, you don't have to do it all yourself. You might be responsible, but that doesn't mean you have to do everything. For instance, there's like from the roll call, the Seattle database wants you to enter like how many people came to a meeting, what the meeting was about, how many miles were driven, how many hours you took, all of that stuff. I don't know if you're all familiar with that particular report called Hours, Miles Driven, but it's something that the Seattle database wants you to enter, because then it rolls up and allows your annual reports or quarterly reports to see how much participation you have from your members, how many hours they spent helping clients or different things. I don't do that report. I have delegated that to someone else, which is great. Not only then that someone else feels like they're more a part of our organization, but it allows them then to become more familiar with the database and so a lot of good things. Like I say, I'm responsible that it gets done. And when Annie's on vacation or something, of course I do the report, but she really enjoys doing it. So it's great. And I know with any of you that work with the food bank, the food bank has just a ton of different reports. They want a monthly report of how many people you served. You have to go in and order food. You have to put in your meal connect if you get groceries from some markets that they've allowed you to become a partner with, all of those. Now, again, I'm responsible that those reports are done. Do I do them? Some of them, but certainly not all of them. Again, I have people who really enjoy having, a small job to do, not a huge job. They wouldn't want to be the secretary, but they don't mind being involved. So we have to weigh certain things that come from, like we get stuff from Safeway and from Rayleigh's and some from Food Max. All of these things have to be weighed and then put into this report. I have a young lady who just really enjoys doing that report. Not a problem. Again, if she's sick or for some reason gone, I can do it, but I don't have to do it. Again, a secretary can be responsible for a lot of things. It doesn't mean you have to do them all. So I think that's probably my best tip is remembering that even though you look at a list of all the things you have to do, doesn't mean that you personally have to do them all. It just means you have to make sure that they get done. The big difference in those two things. So the list in this secretary's handbook, it says you have to, of course, attend all the conference meetings and all the activities. Within reason. I mean, obviously, if you can take a vacation, you're allowed to be sick. We hope you're not, but if you are, there's always somebody that can pick it up and do things for you, take the notes, and record the meeting minutes. One of the things that I do is because I just like to be involved in the meetings, and so I don't take the very best notes when I'm taking it, but I do have the agenda, which helps remind me of everything that went on in the meeting. And then I can just scribble some notes. And if I do the minutes fairly quickly, then everything seems to come together okay. So, because I'm certainly not the best person at taking notes, but at the same time, we get the minutes out pretty well. And what I do is I email them because we only have one member who doesn't have email. So for her, I mail her a copy. But what I do is as soon as I write them up, I out to all the members. So even if they didn't attend the meeting, then they can get an idea of what business we went into during the meeting, what decisions we made, especially with the holidays coming up. Everybody's interested in what we're doing and how we're doing stuff. And so there's a lot of information in our minutes. But again, if I'm not around, I have somebody that'll do it for me. So, and recording the attendance, one thing I do is, well, it's a little different with COVID, but basically we have a sign-in sheet that people sign in when they come to a meeting. So then I just have that list of who attended, and it's fine. Right now with COVID, our church requires us to have people actually give their phone number and they have to sign in. And so the church has to have that for anyone who attended any meeting at our church. So I just make a copy of that and that becomes the roll call things. So because everybody there has to sign in. Makes it easy. You are responsible to know the start and stop dates for conference officers. Again, that's pretty easy. A president is in for 3 years. The president appoints the board, and it's just a list of those people. Not difficult. Most of them stay the whole 3 years. Some of us, I've been secretary there for probably 10 years, quite a while. So I've outlasted a couple presidents. I don't know if that's anything to be proud of or not. Anyway, but there's lots of forms we have. There's intake forms if you have client intake. There's new member forms. And the secretary is just supposed to know all of those. For me, I keep them all on my computer. And what I do is I have a folder for the fiscal year. And I just started the new one for this new fiscal year because it started October 1st. And so all of the things, all of the minutes, the notes from board meetings, all of these things, our tax ID letter and all of these things are on my computer in this folder. And I have a folder for each year. And what I do is right now on the computer active would be last fiscal year and the one that we just started. And then I download onto a thumb drive the older stuff. So I still have it, but that way, otherwise I would have file cabinets full of paper. And I don't think that's necessary. I have enough paper as it is. So that's kind of how I handle that stuff. And everything is in the Seattle database as well. We use it fairly extensively. We find it to be not at all difficult. It really is pretty easy to use. So, and you're supposed to like remind people about meetings. Again, thank goodness for email, because I send out just a reminder when it comes time to have the next meeting or an event. We just had a luncheon yesterday for all of the members, because once a year we do this after one of our food pantries, because we have a lot of people who are just volunteers. They're not really Vincentians, but they come and work at the food pantry. So this allows us to have all of those people as well as our members. And we have a group called the Garden Ministry. Their whole purpose is to grow vegetables that they give to us to give out at our food pantry. So then we include those in our luncheon. And so I was so pleased that yesterday was a wonderful day, because we had it outside in the patio at the church, and it was just lovely, and some time to actually socialize, because of the 3 pillars, one of them is friendship, remember? So then we have a time to really get together and talk. When you're busy with a pantry or with meetings, sometimes those things can slip away. So another thing that the secretary does is putting things in the church bulletin. Every parish, I'm sure, has their own way of doing that, but and it's not that you necessarily have to write them up yourself, because you can get somebody to help. If somebody comes up with the idea that something should be in the church bulletin, not a problem. They can write up the notes, and you just are the one that puts it in the email. With my parish, you have to send it into a particular email address, and it has to be a Word document, things like that. Not really difficult at all. So one thing that is the responsibility of every Vincentian are the 3 pillars: are spirituality, friendship, and service. Every Vincentian has that responsibility. So as far as a spirituality component of a secretary, one thing that I do is when I send out an email message, and like when I send out the minutes, they become an attachment, but I just put a note to Vincentians saying, here are the minutes, let me know if there's anything that I missed, that kind of stuff. But at the end, I put a prayer. My very favorite is one that says, may the Lord enkindle within us the fire of his love and the flame of everlasting charity. I think that's so appropriate for Vincentians. And it's from, I happen to attend Latin Mass. It's from the Missal. So it's one of the prayers in the Latin Mass. And I just really like to put that at the end. And I usually put it in like red font, just so that it's noticeable. I don't do the same one on everyone, but something. It's just a way of including that little bit of spirituality when I communicate with my members. Okay, now Stephen is the what do we call it? Alternate or
Co-host?
Yeah, co-host. So Stephen, why don't you tell people some of your ideas about being a secretary?
So I'm going to go back to a real basic level, which is if you don't have the infrastructure, or work doesn't last very long. Vincent, so there was a couple of months ago, we had a priest named Father John Rybold who did a workshop for us on the origins of St. Vincent de Paul. And Father John Rybold is the Vincentian in residence at DePaul University. And I had the chance to spend a weekend with him. He came out and I took him to Yosemite, and he was just, what a pleasure to just spend time with him. But when he was talking about Vincent, he said Vincent was anything but a mystic. He said Vincent practiced manifest spirituality, and he was a really good organizer. And so that charism really falls on the secretary of the conferences. So how does that work? I mean, well, the president is trying to, in the best cases, be the liaison between the Vincentians, the spiritual advisor, and the parish. Without the infrastructure that is provided by the parish, by the conference secretary, you wouldn't have a conference. So the role is really important, but the fact that I'm really glad with what Joyce said, it is also a very spiritual role, because inherent in that service, I mean, there's this whole section of the society on studying servant leadership, and there isn't a role that better describes or facilitates that charism than the secretary for a conference. Because without we have a responsibility to the parishioners that give us their money to be good stewards of it. We have a responsibility to the other members of the conference that if we get too much into the business of caring for the poor, we need to get them to tack back to the spirituality, which is, to be honest with you, if you look at our rule of the society, the very first purpose of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul is the spiritual development of its members. And so it's really funny that that the work that the parish secretary does is that which is the closest parallel was that of the work that Vincent de Paul did, which is he was a really, really good organizer. He kept track of everything because someone needs to be able to explain, you know, people will help us if we ask them. They will continue to support us if we recognize them. And the only way that you can do that is to know what it is that you're doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just, you know, it's like you're like the Barb Hunt of the conferences. You know, somebody's got to keep the details, and someone's got to be able to tell the story. And there isn't anybody that better knows the story than the conference secretary. Literally, you know how many people are helped. You know where the resources are, and you know who to tap when you need help. One of the best things that I heard that you started off with is you start off with delegation. You know, that the biggest error that any Vincentian can make in any role is to not delegate. We are 18 months plus into the pandemic, and we have had some conferences that their older members had to step back because of the pandemic. They stepped forward and they didn't stop, and now they're burnt out. And one of the things that the secretary does is kind of keeps she's the one, or they are the one, not she, because there are parish secretaries that are. I mean, Mark McMahon was a terrific parish secretary for St. John Vianney. But his role was more than keeping the notes. He was paying attention to the conference. Who's missing, who's not missing? Is there somebody that maybe we need to kind of reel back in a little bit? And facilitated that, that communication with the president, with the other officers, who are all servant leaders. They don't govern, they're the servant leaders. So did I answer your question, Joyce, or you just gave me a soapbox and I stepped up on?
That's fine. But you know, one of the things that I think the most important message I have for you guys today that are secretaries is in fact the delegation, because it's not just that it gets you out of having to do everything, but the people really feel much more engaged if they have something to do. And most of them don't want a big job, but so many of them would love having a small thing to do. And that helps you as secretary, but it gives them a feeling of belonging too. So I think that's really important. So since now it's a time for anybody to ask questions or tell us a bit about your tips of being a better secretary. So who wants to start?
Joyce, I'd like to ask, how can we get a copy of that handbook?
So just for grins, if you click on the chat box, I actually put it in and I sent it to every one of you.
Oh.
It's a PDF and all you have to do is download it. Click on it and it will download.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really, it's got a lot of forms in the back that maybe are not what you might want to use. They're helpful, but if you have a form on your computer, for instance, or something that you would rather use, that's fine. This is really shows more non-computer oriented secretary stuff, but you know, but it's got a lot of good messages in it, put it that way. So
Joyce, could you talk?
anything else, Sheila?
Joyce, could you
Do you have
talk?
any other questions, Sheila?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you have any other questions?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, who else wants to talk about their part of being secretary? Either Joe, Beth, or Diane.
Well, I spoke with Kathy, who's the president of our conference. And in the past, I've been secretary of another group that I belong with. And what I've found to be helpful was to record the meetings so that if there was something that was, you know, missed as far as monetary figures or members present or whatever the case might be, that I could use that to refer to when, you know, putting the minutes together to disseminate to the group.
That's a good suggestion. I hadn't thought of that myself, but I just try and do them quick enough so I remember. But having them recorded, yeah, great idea, Diane. Anything else?
No.
Okay, Mary, Jo Beth, how about you have some ideas about being a secretary?
Well, the thing that she's saying about recording is our meetings have been being recorded. So my task is to say, how do I get into the recordings?
Well,
Yes.
that's probably a technical issue that somebody can help you with, I'm
Right.
sure.
Patty will, the previous secretary will help me to do that. And that's what I'm going to say. If you had a previous secretary, you know, wow, that's fantastic, you know, to be able to go back to that person and say, you know, can you help me to do this? And maybe even say, you know, could you continue to do this? Like you say, a little tiny part to delegate to that person. Yes, I'm the new secretary and I've taken on and I've accepted, but could you help me with this part maybe?
Yeah. Well, I know one of the things that in the handbook it says about the secretary is supposed to remember birthdays for the members. Well, and that's all, in our information in the member application forms. We asked what their birth date is, but we have at our conference, we have right now 2 ladies who they share 1 month, one sends birthday cards that are appropriate. The next month it's the other one, they share that. And they do that for a year. And then the next year we have 2 other ladies that do that. Again, it's a small task, but it's always nice when, you get a birthday card from the conference. It's just one of those things that people remember, particularly people who don't come to meetings a lot. It keeps them kind of in touch with the rest of us. So that is really a good thing.
So you mentioned a thing there that a couple of times that we seem to have lost. Originally, when Steve came 6 or 7 years ago, there was a form for people who were coming in, and nobody's been able to find that form again. So my question is that form in our conference secretary? I hope so, because it's very helpful. It gave their name, their address, what they wanted to volunteer for, what they were available, the days and the times they wanted to be, that they were available and would help. And nobody's been able to find that form again for 6 or 7 years.
Okay, I don't know whether that form is actually in the handbook, because the handbook is
Oh, you
I'll
mentioned
tell
it
you
a
in a
couple
second.
times, so I thought it was
It's
there.
36 pages, so I don't have it memorized.
Oh,
Yeah. But as it turns out, I will get hold of the copy of what we call our member application, and I'll email
right.
it to you, Mary Beth. Okay?
Jo Beth, yeah, great.
Jo Beth, I'm sorry. Jo
That's
Beth,
okay.
yes. Okay, so anybody else have any questions or thoughts?
I had one question, and I was hoping you would elaborate on the your use of the Seattle database. What part you play in facilitating that mechanism?
Good
Okay.
question.
As secretary, when we do have a new member, I enter the member into the database. Used to be, actually, I haven't always done that. Used to be Butch, our treasurer, did it, but we're trying to take a few things off his plate. And so I've been putting it in the database. It's really very easy. The only thing that that I'll share with you that I was surprised when I first put some people in is because it's the database, it wants you to come up with a username and password for each member that you enter. Even if you can give them different types of access, and even if you only give them like read only, so they can't make any changes to the database, particularly until they learn more about it, that's a good idea. But I was shocked all of a sudden at the last minute, before I can finish the application or finish the data for the new member, I have to come up with one. So I came up with a scheme. And then I just, on the member application paperwork, I write that down. The person can always go in and change theirs at any time. But it was just, I thought, wow, I've got to come up with something. And I know what Butch had done for usernames for all of us. It's just our first name and the beginning of like mine is Joyce O. So it's the first letter of your last name. That's everybody's username. But then I thought password, well, that's something different too. So I did come up with a scheme that's very simple so that I can do those. And I mark them on the paperwork, so then the person can always go in later and change their password if they choose to. But it's really very easy to put somebody in. The things you have to make a decision on is, for instance, if you have somebody who they're thinking about being a member, but you want them in the database so that you have the information, maybe they haven't really decided if they want just to be a volunteer at the food pantry or they really want to be a Vincentian. There's one category called inquiry. And I use that in the database for people who haven't really made up their mind, but we want to have their address, phone number, stuff like that on our member list and be able to put them on email for, reminders about events and meetings. So we do that, and that's really easy. We also use the Seattle database for every client that comes to our food pantry. I think we talked about this. I don't know if you were in that when we were in that first breakout room where we thought we were in the meeting. And I think it was Carol Brazil from St. Callistus was asking about the database. We put a client in because it's really very easy to put in a new client. Just it allows you to put in how many people in the family, their name, address, phone number, things you might want to know. And then that records that they came in that day for food. And so we can track not only how many people, how many families, and how many individuals we feed over a month's time, but we can keep track of people who maybe they come every week for a year, and all of a sudden you notice, gee, Sheila isn't here anymore. We've noticed she hasn't been here for 3 or 4 weeks. And so then you can go in the database and you can see when the last time she came, you can see her phone number and you can call her and say, hey, is everything okay? Again, those things, putting either a member or a client in the database is really very easy. And there's so many things you can roll up then for the reports at the end of the quarter or the end of the year and things like that. So I personally do not do the year-end report. We have a fantastic treasurer who does that. I understand in the data or in something about being a secretary, you're supposed to be responsible for it. Again, I might be responsible, but I don't have to do it. So thank goodness we have a great treasurer that rolls all those numbers up, but he can do it very easily because we're using the Seattle database. And it's really nothing to be frightened about. It's very easy to use. You can look up clients, you can look up members, you can look, get reports on all sorts of things. So anything else in the database that you want to add, Stephen?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so one of your favorite people, Shauna Costanzo, invited me over to a meeting at St. Bonaventure. And they did something a little bit different where they would hook up the computer to a big screen. And as they were doing the reflection, as they were going over the cases for the week, they would literally in real time pull them up onto the screen, and they would talk about it and make the notes in the database as they were talking. And I just thought that was really an effective use of the technology, because there are times that inadvertently you will have multiple people from the same conference working with the same person, and they didn't know about it. And by having everybody there, you kind of eyeball it, and it's sort of a unifying. But I just thought that was a terrific use of the technology.
Yeah, we don't do that mostly because we don't have the big screen that we can use, but we sit around a table with laptops and everybody's talking. And we have come up with a scheme of how we put the notes in, because again, Stephen, like you said, one of our members will talk, especially with COVID, when you're doing so many more things over the phone or things like that. It's not quite the same as home visits, but you might talk to somebody on the phone and then you want to put your conversation in so that people can see that this happened and what the client said. But we put that in, and then we put in parentheses, we put our initials at the end of the note.
Okay.
And then the next person that talks to them, or next person that wants to know something about them, they can see that you had a conversation with that person a certain date and what you said and what they said, because you're recording all of this. So it's very convenient.
I think one of the things that you said that I think is a best practice is when you were talking about the fact that you hadn't seen somebody for a while and you looked on the database and you had the data and you had the ability to look at it and kind of use it as a cue to, hey, maybe we should call this person. You know, it's not that we're, you know better than anybody else at this point that that our Vincentianism isn't a one-shot deal. They come in, we give them something, and then we never see them again. It really is about the relationships.
Yes. Yeah. And they're actually, we call them clients sometimes because that's kind of a simple word. We're trying to say neighbors in need, but it doesn't matter. They're still our friends. And we try to make sure that we take care of them. I mean, that's the service part of the 3 pillars, so.
I have a question, Joyce.
Sure.
In the database, when you input members, I've noticed, or maybe don't know how it works, when someone moves out of state and they're no longer a member, it appears that one cannot delete a person who has been a Vincentian.
What we do is make them inactive. Yeah, that doesn't really delete them, but then they don't print out on your member roster anymore. So
Okay.
that works for us anyway.
Yeah, I apparently didn't see that.
Yeah.
And
it's
if you
it's like what I said about the inquirers, because you can be an active member, you can be an associate member, you can be a contributing member, you can be, there's that selection of things for that particular little input area. One of them is inactive.
So Joyce, I know that you were involved with the updating of the bylaws for your conference. Did you see anything significant that impacts the role of the conference secretary?
I think that's where there's a small thing about the actual duties of the secretary in the new bylaws, but it does talk. I think that's where I noticed that the secretary is responsible for a lot of the financial information that I really wasn't aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And again, being responsible for something doesn't mean you have to do it. And so that's where I've kind of lined myself with, we have both a treasurer and an assistant treasurer, both really great people. And so I just know that they're doing these things. So that took that load off my shoulders. But I haven't seen anything. There's some things in those new bylaws, by the way, that I think are unnecessary.
Yes. And I think that it messed with the, some of you know this, but St. Vincent de Paul nationally believes in subsidiarity. And I think that there's some things in the bylaws that go against the structure of subsidiarity, where it is more delegation down from on high than it is. The primary functioning of the conference is the head. That's the tip of the arrow. It's not national. It's the conference that's the tip of the arrow. And I think that in trying to affect a change at national, they want to dictating, not delegating, because it was dictating some stuff in the bylaws that I think is inappropriate if you're following the model of subsidiarity.
Yeah, I'll tell you, just between you and me, Stephen, there was one section of that we actually did not put in our bylaws.
Good.
But don't tell Bob Lyles. We tried to make him as much as we could to be the national model. But where something was truly inappropriate for our conference, we did leave it out. It's not a lot, it's just small things, but nevertheless.
So I have a question from the role of conference secretary and the use of the Seattle database. Have you found it effective at being able to see if people are being served at other conferences? I know that there's that function now in the new database where you can where if you type in the name, it comes up that so-and-so is being seen, or, hey, this name has come up before, the similarities?
It's, well, you have to have the client data, the client information up, and then you can go to more history,
Okay,
and that's where you would see it. Yeah.
Okay.
It really doesn't show automatically, but it does allow you to see whether that person has gone to, say, we're Immaculate Heart of Mary in Brentwood. Let's say that they happen to live in Brentwood, but they went to Oakley, to St. Anthony's and asked for some help. If they did help them, or if they made any entrance into the database for that person, we can see it. Yeah. Now, if they just go there and ask and they send them back to us, and if they don't make any notation into the database, obviously we don't see it. But yeah, and we don't look it up all the time,
Mhm.
but you know, we have some people, if they're out of the Brentwood area, then we would tend to look it up, because we do help people that are not just in Brentwood, because we help them if they're a parishioner. But we have a lot of parishioners that live in Antioch and Oakley and Byron and, you know, the surrounding area.
Sure.
Some of them just prefer Immaculate Heart of Mary. Maybe they were going there before and moved out of Brentwood into some other area and just want to stay with Immaculate Heart. So,
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if Diane or Sheila or even Joe Beth have ever been out. I had the privilege of coming out one year to see your pantry when you were getting some of the produce from the farm that you had there. And it is
our garden,
yeah, your garden. It's not a, I mean, it's like, there's an acre, 2 acres of,
it's pretty big. Yeah.
yeah. But what that did for me was the fact that you care enough to think about the nutritional value of what you're giving out and giving the fresh produce. And it really made me feel good. And I thought it was a really good manifestation of spirituality.
Actually, with a number of things, the garden ministry is a small group of people, and we have quite a bit of land. They don't actually garden as much as they used to. We have found there's some things that it's better for them to plant for us, that because we don't get them from the food bank. One of the things, we have people who love hot chilies. Our garden ministry grows so many different varieties of hot chilies. Habaneros are really hot, but they're also very expensive, and they grow great in Brentwood. So yeah,
Very good.
we give them, yeah, and we bag them up into little bags, and so yeah, works out great.
Joyce, this would be a very wonderful time that if we had the split screen, and we were blessed in that Larry, as the president, would do that we could see the database. And so I'm going to ask again, just to repeat, when you go into your database and you're going into the neighbors who were entered, to see if they had been served at another conference, you go to more
History.
history.
It's called
Okay.
More History.
Okay,
I
thank you.
think it's kind of at the bottom, might even be
Okay.
on the right-hand side, but it's near the bottom of the whole screen. It's called More History. And that just, if they haven't been seen anyplace else, you would at least get all the more history for the many times you may have helped that client.
Right. The reason I was asking that is because Steve came over to minister to a person who he got through Catholic Charities and asked me to go along. And we kept ministering to this person. And it wasn't just until and after, I came out of the presidency and Larry went in, and that he discovered recently that this person had also been going to St. Jerome's and, working it, so to speak.
Yeah,
And so,
we do. We find that not, fortunately, is not too frequent, but yeah.
Right. But that's why I'd really like to know that, because,
Yeah.
we have a lot of people here who are really in need, especially we have the Missionaries of Charity who were invited here by Bishop Cordeleone, And when they came, they went all over the Contra Costa County and looked at every part of it to see where they felt the poorest of the poor were. And they are here in Richmond, down by St. Mark's. And so we need to serve them, and we have a lot of people that we need to serve, and we want to serve, and to have someone come from another conference who's been helping them for years to come into our conference. So we just would prefer to do the ones that are in our extended area, so to speak.
The most needy.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. That's what my.
Now this is a new tool that
Oh.
I mean, we haven't always been able to see that history. That's fairly
Okay.
new with the new enhancements that they made to the Shadow database. So it's
Okay.
very helpful.
Great.
Okay, anything else that anybody wants to ask, talk about?
Well, I didn't know if you knew this, but St. David's Pantry, which was what was tucked up underneath Joe Beth, and St. David of Wales, was the only program that actually had to kind of go on hiatus because of the pandemic. It had been going for about 30 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and serving, I don't know, 90 to 120 families a week. And then they could only come back every other month. So you're looking at, 1,200 families that would cycle through there every 2 months. It was an enormous operation. And it would have been, I hopefully that we'll get it back going. But right now we need a place to land it. None of that would have been possible if it weren't for the role of the parish secretary, because it was that role kept all the documentation that kept them going for 30 years.
Wow.
Because
wow.
they had to explain,
That's
they had to track, they needed numbers. You can't run it like you're doing a home visit. You can't spend down the money, because if you have that many people coming every month, you have to plan for it. You have to make sure you have enough food on time. You have to make sure that, that if you've got vendors that you're writing vouchers for, that they're paid. And that all kind of rested on Mercy Madigan, who was that role for St. David's Pantry. So I just want to reiterate the value and the importance of the work that you're doing, and the work that I don't think anybody realizes how much or how important that role is, to kind of, and most of the time it's probably because the parish secretary keeps their mouth shut.
not always. So I guess with that, Diane and Sheila and Jo Beth, we can all kind of pat ourselves on the back. Steve thinks we do a good job. I think what have we got? 5 minutes before we're supposed to go back?
I think we'll
Any other
automatically
story?
shift. Yeah, I think we'll automatically shift back. We'll see a little message. Yeah.
We got the message that we had 20 minutes, and yeah. Any other stories anybody wants to tell? Thank you for saying that about our garden. We have a marvelous garden ministry. Yes, those people are so great. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
They go and they weed and water and pick and plant, and a lot of hard work. And we're grateful to them for they brought this year. They had melons. Oh my gosh, such great melons, and tomatoes, and earlier in the spring they start with crops that don't last when it gets really hot. But we had Swiss chard and stuff. And in fact, we just had a conference yesterday afternoon after our luncheon, because they always ask for my input of what they should plant next year, because they don't do the garden all year round. Once it becomes kind of the rainy season, so to speak, which we hope we have one, then they don't garden. They just, we have a farmer who comes in and tills it all up, and then it just kind of sits idle until spring, and then he comes and tills it up again for us. Brings his big tractor, because like Stephen said, it's a little more than a garden, but
It's
it's
huge.
just a big garden.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
but we're
so-
really great.
So who facilitates the events that you have, like the when you're doing the friendship side, it's a great story about you guys gathering and having the luncheon. Do you do that? Does the president do that?
It's something that, because it's a tradition, we just try and remember to do it. And we always try and get a committee, non-board member people, if possible, because the board does so many other things. So in fact, in this case, I wasn't involved in the work of doing it. I just kind of facilitated bringing up the subject, so we knew we would have one. Again, delegation, that's what it's all about.
So I'd like to ask
No,
you,
I did bring wine to our lunch.
did you?
Yes,
Did
I
you?
did. Yes. We were all finished with our work, and so we could have lunch and a little glass of wine.
So I don't know if Diane and Jo Beth and Sheila know this, but Joyce is actually, in addition to her role at Immaculate Heart of Mary, she's now on the board of directors for the District Council of Contra Costa County. Is there anything out of this session, Joyce, that you could bring to the board that you think would be of value?
Good question. I will actually have to think about that one. Yeah. I think the thing that I do that I think is a lot more fun, maybe is the best word, is the formation, spirituality and formation committee that I'm on. Shauna and I do, we work so well together. And that to me is one of the jobs I have that I really enjoy. So, but not all secretaries have to do all those things. Yeah. So
I just, to just say that you're just the parish secretary you're just the secretary for the conference at Immaculate Heart is a little bit of an understatement.
well, like I said, when I first joined, I knew that there was a St. Vincent de Paul, but I didn't know much about them. And I've certainly learned a lot. Yeah. So it's a great organization. I just am very, very positive about St. Vincent de Paul and I think it's the three pillars we have. I like the fact that it's got the spirituality piece there, because that's very important to me, my faith, and then the friendship. And I have made so many good friends over the years that are Vincentian. Some have left the membership and they, off doing something else, but we're still friends. But we met in St. Vincent de Paul, and then the service. And I think service used to be what I thought St. Vincent was all about. But now I realize that that's only a part of it. So it's really a great organization.
So the secretaries or the conference secretaries that are here, what can they take from this presentation and help facilitate that those other two pillars, that we've talked about the service side. What can they bring back to their conference to help facilitate the friendship and the spirituality? What suggestions would you have? If they know that they're at a conference where maybe that isn't where it's all about serving the poor and not about the friendship or the spirituality, what can the conference secretary do to help facilitate that?
Any ideas, Diane?
Well, I would say to bring up your idea of getting together on an annual basis or however often you want to do that. But right now with the pandemic, that's a little bit, it's limiting right now. That we could do that. I think some of
One thing,
us,
okay, one thing that you need to understand when we have a social like we did yesterday, we do not use funds from our treasury that were given to us by the parish.
oh, definitely.
We collect money separately for this. So we have a little box and, when we have meetings, people or put in a few dollars here and there, but at the end of a year, we've got more than enough money to pay for that. So we try to let people understand that we don't take away money that we would use in service.
Oh,
We
definitely.
do it out with our kind of what we call our own funds, so to
Yeah.
speak. And see, right now with the COVID, you can't bring any homemade, we can't have a potluck. You can't do things, you have to have it either cooked in the church kitchen by somebody who is qualified. The Knights have a guy who is a caterer and he catered our luncheon for us. But there's so many restrictions from the COVID things that was very important that we made everybody realize we were following all the COVID rules and we were not using really service money for that luncheon. But it's a great social thing,
Definitely, yeah.
This would be a great time, it seems to me, to delegate. I am not
Yes.
a good planner of parties, and I think there are other people that I will look around and ask them if they would kindly do it, because they're
Yes.
better than me at that.
There are a lot of things. Actually, Vincent was so organized. I think a secretary needs to be organized, but that doesn't mean they do everything. But just being
Exactly.
organized so that it's on the list of things to do and you check off because somebody's going to do it. So I guess that's my real message is delegation.
Right. That's what I took out of management meeting in college. I remember that delegate and one of my, as a nursing home administrator, the staff developer who did the teaching in the convalescent hospital would say to me, JoBeth, you're always saying delegate, 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 delegate. And I said, yep, that's right. And I'm going to keep on doing it.
Well, and delegate is really sharing.
Mhm.
Exactly. And it's
Allowing,
showing that you trust in the other person to
yes,
do that.
yes.
And then
Mhm.
don't interfere. Once you delegate,
Right.
stay out unless you're asked.
Yeah, I mean, and the person that you're delegating to, if they have a question, they'll come back and ask and say,
Right.
hey, I'm not sure I'm doing this right, and so
Right.
you can look it over and I find it's very, very easy to do that.
Right.
There's some things that I can't, that people won't take. Nobody wants to write grants, but other than that, a lot of things I can delegate. So it works out very well.
So I know that like at last Tuesdays when Ralph Middlecamp did his presentation on Frederick Ozanam, he talked for a little bit about how do we engage younger people in the society. And what he said was almost word for word what you said, which is you have to give them something meaningful to do. You can't invite them and then not give them something to do. And especially young people, they want to have something with some meat in it, that they can do, that they can participate in, that they can own, and it's their contribution to the mechanism, and not oh well, we'll just have you do paperwork in the back while we're out doing the real work.
Yeah, that doesn't make them happy. You're right.
But I think it is systemic. It's a systemic shift that is in the process of happening. I mean, there are still some Vincentians that say we've always done it this way. Why do it? Why do it any other way? Or, we really don't need any more help, right?
And it's kind of like delegating small tasks. When you need to make a change, it's better to make small changes. Take a little piece that you think can be an improvement in a process and just focus on a part of it rather than trying to make a radical change. I find that people get really upset with big changes but little evolutionary changes are much easier to take. How come we're still here? Well, I thought we were supposed to go back at 20 minutes
of.
to 11.
At 10 of, we're supposed to go
Oh,
back.
10 of, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, we still have some time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to point out that our conference is blessed to have De La Salle High School very close.
Mhm.
And we've had a lot of young men volunteer at the pantry, and they get so much out of it. And then that rubs off on us to realize how important and joyful this work is. So those young people are helping our conference immeasurably.
You're very fortunate then to have that. We find it difficult to find young people to help at our pantry because they're in school or,
Yeah.
that it's the time of day is a problem. But if you're right close by DeSalle, that's great.
Just one little.
What kind of jobs do you have them do, Sheila?
Well, usually they come for special occasions like Thanksgiving or Christmas pantry duty because they're off of school, but other times as well. And they'll help give out food, but mostly they'll help the people take their groceries out to their car. And that's a wonderful ministry for them because they get to communicate with our people, and they learn from them and what it is to be charitable. So I think that's the best thing, help them out with their groceries.
Yeah, and they all need help getting, because I know at our pantry, we end up with a cart full of stuff. They have to, somebody has to help them get it out in their car and put it in the trunk. And yeah, it's a job, definitely a job, important.
So Sheila, we now have a friend who really understands the society at Carondelet. The new president of Carondelet is Rick Richardson's daughter. Rick Richardson is he's
from Hope Conference.
Hope Conference. So I hopefully that we'll be able to take advantage of that relationship and really try and we've had difficulty getting young people engaged. We've had for a while we've had a little bit of success with the grade school kids and St. Mary's, Barbara. They used to do this can collection, and they worked it out with Mountain Mike's Pizza that the class that brought the most cans in, they got pizza for lunch one day. And that they didn't have to wear their uniform to school that one day if they, and that was a real incentive, and that really helped the pantry at St. Mary's. But those are a little bit different, programs.
My daughter was the director of development at Carondelet for many years.
Oh,
she's moved on to another job, but I know what you mean by Carondelet helping.
Well, thank God for De La Salle and Carondelet. I know that the St. David's Pantry at St. Mark's would get about 1,200 boxes of cereal every year that they would bring to school, and that went literally the Jo Beth is right. It's the Iron Triangle area is the poorest of the poor. That's where everybody is. So.
Well, I think they're going to be getting us back any minute. So I really want to thank you all for being here today, for contributing, and it's been nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Steve.
Joyce, once again, for all of your help and all of your expertise.
No problem.
Okay, we got 1 minute. Let's count down.
1 minute. Okay. Yeah, right.
Thank you, everybody. Good to meet you all who I didn't know before.
Yes. I'm sorry I didn't get a picture of you, Sheila, but one day we'll meet. And which conference are you from again?
St. Mary's, Walnut Creek.
Okay, been there a few times. Yeah.
That's where Ed Reagan
Yeah,
was flag.
yeah, he's not doing too well, I hear.
Yeah, I need to go over and see him. I talked to him about maybe 2 weeks ago. He called me.
Mhm.
I've got some stories about Ed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I loved it. I was there when the Jefferson Award was given to Ed.
Yeah.
From KPIX.
Oh, wow.
he was a Vincentian when JFK was in office.
Hmm,
Wow.
wow.
A long time ago. Okay, here we go. Returning.
Okay, everyone.